Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Alhamdulillah, this is the 91st session of Seerah Khatim al-Nabiyyin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And just a quick review inshallah before we go on. So we're talking about the battle of Muraysi or Banu Mustariq, and we talked about how the fight that had broken out and how the Muslims were commanded to hurry and move on, to march on. And the Prophet ﷺ, one of the hikmah behind this is the Prophet ﷺ wanted the Muslims to stop, to not have a chance to talk about it further and try to forget what had happened. So the Muslims went on and they marched on, and we talked about last session, we talked about how the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he mentions that a foul smell comes from a believer when they sin. So when a believer sins, a stench or a foul smell emanates from our bodies, just like someone when they play basketball or they sweat, or when they sleep at night, in the morning they get up and they sweat and they have a smell, or a smell after eating garlic or onion and whatnot, a smell that comes from the mouth. In the same way, when a person sins, a stench comes from that person's body, and the angels can smell this stench. So one of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that when the person lies, when a Muslim lies, then the angels move away from that person. They move 1 mile away from that person because of the stench that is coming from that person. And I mentioned the different hadith, for example, where the Prophet ﷺ in this return journey from Muraysi or Bani Mustaliq, where they were coming and a smell came upon them. So they smelled this breeze came with a really foul smell, and the Prophet ﷺ says, "Do you know what this smell is?" And the Sahaba said, "No, we don't know." And the Prophet ﷺ said, "This is from the ghiba that the munafiqeen are doing." So when the munafiqeen were doing ghiba and talking about this, we're talking about the Ansar, talking about the Muhajirin, talking about the Prophet ﷺ, because of that ghiba that they were doing, this is the foul stench that is coming from them. Also, when they were about to reach Medina Munawwara, another smell came, and the Prophet ﷺ said that this is from a death of a munafiq that died in Medina. And when they reached Medina, they found out that indeed one of the heads or the leaders of the munafiqeen had died in Medina, and there was a foul smell coming. A foul smell coming. A foul smell was coming because of that person's death. So again, because of this is something that we don't really take care of, because this is something that we don't really see or we can't experience. But there is, just like we have to keep ourselves physically clean, we need to keep ourselves spiritually clean also. So, and that's by doing tawbah, repentance, doing good deeds, inshallah ta'ala. Also, I mentioned, just to mention again, Wahab ibn Munabbah, rahimahullah, he says that when a person dies, the angels that are writing the good deeds and the bad deeds, they come to this person and they say to him, Jazakallah min sahibi khaira. Sahibin khaira. They say that, may Allah reward you, how good of a person that you were. You were doing good deeds. And he said, they would say, فَنِعْمَ الصَّاحِبْ كُنْتِ. How good of a person you were. فَكَمْ أَحْضَرْتَنَا مَعَكْ فِي مَجَالِسِ الْخَيْرِ وَكَمْ شَمَمْنَا مِنْكَ الرَّوَاحِيَ الطَّيِّبَةِ حَالَ طَاعَتِكَ الْخَالِصَةِ. So these angels say to this person that how good of a person you were, and how many times you allowed us to be with you in a good state and when you're doing good deeds, and how many times we smelled good fragrances coming from you. And this is not the fragrances of Calvin Klein or CK or these colognes and attar that we use, oud and whatnot, but these were the smells coming from the good deeds that this person was doing. So because of this, we were able to smell these nice fragrances through you. So again, we need to be careful, and inshallah, again, Allah give us tawfiq to clean our insides just like we would like our outsides, we clean ourselves outside physically. Now, we also talked about the revelation of Surah Munafiqun came on this return journey. So when the Muslims are coming back, and we talked about Zayd ibn Arqam radiallahu anhu, was a young Sahabi who heard with his own ears heard Abdullah ibn Ubay talking about the Prophet ﷺ in a very disgusting and negative way, and talking about the Muslims in this way. And he went and told the Prophet ﷺ, and at that point the wahi had not been revealed. So Zayd ibn Arqam radhiallahu anhu, basically the witness or his testimony was not taken, and this resulted in him becoming very depressed, because he felt like everyone thinks he's a liar, especially the Prophet ﷺ. He thought that maybe the Prophet ﷺ thinks I'm a liar now, that I made this up. So he became very depressed. But later on during the journey, the Prophet ﷺ calls him, because Surah Munafiqun was revealed, and the same exact words that Abdullah ibn Ubay had said and that Zayd ibn Arqam had narrated to the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed those same exact words in the Quran. And the Prophet ﷺ told Zayd ibn Arqam that basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done your tasdeeq. He has confirmed what you had said and what you had narrated. So that was the revelation of Surah Munafiqun. Now, one of the things about Surah Munafiqun is that the nifaq of the disbelief, especially Abdullah ibn Ubay, was open now. Before this, it was hidden. Nobody knew, is he Muslim, is he not, is he true Muslim or not. But now, because of this revelation of Surah Munafiqun, his nifaq became open, and it was for everyone to see. And we talked about how Abdullah ibn Ubay, his son and daughter, were devout Muslims, true Muslims. They were Sahaba. And we talked about how the father, before entering upon Medina Munawwara, at the gates of Medina, he stopped his own father, and he put a sword to his father, and he said to him that you will not enter into Medina until you admit that you are from the lowly, and that the Prophet ﷺ is from the A'az. He is from the honored ones. And that until the Prophet ﷺ allows you to enter Medina, I will not let you enter. So then he said those words, and then later on when the Prophet ﷺ was passing, he said to the son, let your father go in, allow him to go in. Then he was able to go in. Now later on, either that same day or the next day or whenever it happened, the same son Abdullah ibn Ubay, so the son goes to Rasulullah ﷺ, and he says that I've heard that you want, that perhaps you want the head of my father, that you're thinking about getting my father executed because of his words of nifaq. Okay, and we're not even talking about ifk. Yeah, this is something else that's coming after. But we're talking about the words of nifaq and what he said and how the ayat were revealed. So he says that if you are to do so, then allow me to do it. Because I can't bear to see the killer of my father walking around in the streets, and maybe I might go and retaliate. And because of a kafir, and he's referring to his father, he says, because of a kafir, I might kill a Muslim and I might go to hellfire. So please allow me, if you want to take my father's head, let me do it. Allow me to do it. So again, this is again I'm sorry?
His sister's name?
Jamila.
She was married
to Hanzala ibn Abi Amir, yeah, the Ghasil Malaika, yeah. So Jamila bint Abdullah ibn Ubay, that was the sister. So the daughter of Abdullah ibn Ubay, the sister of Abdullah. So he asks for that, and the Prophet ﷺ says, but rather, we will keep good relations with him until he passes away, or as long as he's with us, we will treat him in a good way. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba had reached Medina, there was one person, actually two people who were missing, who did not arrive yet. And no one had noticed until later on that same day they arrived. Now, the story is told to us by Aisha radhiallahu anha, Ummuna Aisha radhiallahu anha. She tells us in a hadith in Sahih Bukhari and other books of authentic hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, it's a lengthy hadith, but one of the things she says, and this hadith is called Hadithatul Ifk, the slander of the Prophet, of Aisha radhiallahu anha. So the slandering that was disgustingly thrown against her, and this is one of the hardest tests that came on the Prophet ﷺ. And we learned, from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that ashaddul bala al anbiya, that the ones who were tested the most are the anbiya, thumma al amthal, thumma al amthal. Then the ones who were closest to Allah subhanahu, and then they were closest. So the prophets and messengers are tested the hardest by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this hard test was one of the you could say, one of the hardest tests that Prophet ﷺ ever went through in his life. Now, Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu also comments about this ifk and this haditha later on, and he says that even in Jahiliyyah, we were never accused of such filth and such disgusting behavior, and we're being accused of this after Islam. Like how could somebody even think about this? Anyway, so Aisha radhiyallahu anha, she says that the Prophet ﷺ, when he would go on an expedition, he would draw lots. Now what this means is randomly choosing, like when you pick out of a hat or what they would do is they would take sticks. One of the sticks would be short, or it would be marked, for example, in a certain way, and then the people would, so randomly you take a stick, and then the one that's marked or the one that's short or whatever the case may be, then that person has basically drawn the lot. That person gets chosen. So Aisha radhiyallahu anha says that when the Prophet ﷺ would go on an expedition, he would randomly pick who would go with him. As far as being inside or being at home, the Prophet ﷺ would be fair with all his wives, and each one of them would have appointed day where the Prophet ﷺ would spend with them. But this is regards to traveling, he would draw lots. And the ulama say that it's permissible to draw lots, to randomly pick names, for example, and whatnot, when we're choosing something. And there's many examples. For example, Yunus alayhi salam, when he was in the boat, when he had left his city, and he was in the boat, and they said that basically it's too much weight in the boat. One of us has to go into the water, or all of us will die. And they drew lots, and Yunus alayhi salam's name was taken out again and again, and then that's when he went into the water, and the whale came and swallowed Yunus alayhi salam. Excuse me. Another example was Zakaria alayhi salam. It's mentioned where when they drew lots to see who will take care of Maryam alayhi salam. So that was another example. So again, it's permissible to do this when you're randomly selecting someone's name for something you need to do. So it's allowed to do that. Now, Aisha radhiyallahu anha, when they were traveling, they would have a hawdaj. So one thing is that the ulama have a different opinion when exactly this battle took place. Some say it was after the battle of Ahzab, after the Khandaq, and some say it was before. Most likely it was before. Allah alam again, but they say that the revelation of hijab was already done before this. So Aisha radhiyallahu anha was traveling in a hawdaj. The hawdaj is basically like a compartment or carriage that you put on top of a camel. So it's like a small room, you could say, or a small compartment, and you put it upon the camel, and then you travel in that. So the woman is completely covered, and she can take off the niqab at that point and sit freely inside the hawdaj. So she would travel in this way, and she says that this is on the way back, on the return journey. And again, keep in mind that the Prophet ﷺ had told the Sahaba to keep on marching. So whenever they would stop for a short while, a quick stop, just for using the bathroom, doing wudu, praying and whatnot, and then quickly moving on. So it wasn't like, okay, we're going to stay here for the night. It would be like a quick stopover. So when they stopped, and the ulama mentioned it was at night time, Aisha radhiyallahu anha went out far away from the army to relieve herself. And again, this is the sunnah of that time. They didn't have bathrooms and stuff like that. And what they would do is they would go far away out into the desert, behind a bush or behind a mound or something like that, where no one can see them. So Aisha radhiyallahu anha goes out to relieve herself, and when she's coming back, she realizes that she had lost her necklace. That the necklace she was wearing, it was not there. She didn't have any, or the string had broken or whatnot. So she went back, retraced her steps to go and find her necklace. And the ulama mentioned that this necklace was not of any really value. It was more, you could say, sentimental. Maybe the Prophet ﷺ had gifted it to her or something like that. It wasn't something very expensive. And this is Aisha radhiyallahu anha, the queen of the time. She's married to the Prophet ﷺ, and he could have got her any kind of expensive necklace or something like that. But again, the Prophet ﷺ and his wives would lead a simple life. And Aisha radhiyallahu anha had this simple necklace. She lost it, but she wanted to go and find it. In some rawayat it actually comes that it wasn't even hers, it was someone else's. She had borrowed, so she was worried that I need to go and return this to its owner. So she went to retrace her steps and go and find this necklace. Now as she's going to look for it, she took a long time, and she finally found it. She came back. As she came back, she realized that they had left. The whole army had left. And again, keep in mind that they're in a hurry to leave. So everyone's doing whatever they need to do and get up and go. And she mentions herself that basically that because she was light, and the men who were carrying the hodage and put it back onto the camel, they did not realize. So what they would do is basically they would stop. They would make the camel sit down, anaqa. They would make it sit down. They would take off the hodage, put it on the side, and then they would move far away. So they would move far away so she can come out, get out, and she can go and whatever she needs to do. And what they did was they came back. They didn't realize she was not back yet, and they didn't even ask. They didn't say anything. They just basically took it, and because she was light, they didn't realize that she's in there or not. They put it on the camel, and they left, not thinking that she's not even there. So she came back and she said that the army had left. So she sat down in the spot because she thought that sooner or later the Prophet ﷺ will realize that I'm not in the hodaj. So he'll send someone, or he'll come himself to come to get me, or to find me. So she said, I sat down in that spot, and eventually she fell asleep. So she fell asleep in this spot, and she only she was awoken when a Sahabi by the name of Safwan ibn Mu'attal, he comes and finds her. So Safwan ibn Mu'attal, it's mentioned that he had a heavy sleeping problem. So when he would sleep, he would be a heavy sleeper, and it would be difficult for him to get up. So sometimes he would be late in getting up and whatnot, so that's why he was lagging behind. Other ulama say that it was actually commanded by the Prophet ﷺ to stay behind in case there's anything lost, so he can pick it up and he can bring it back to Medina. Just be following the army and anything that's lost. So Allah alam, but it could be a combination of these two. Because of him being late, the Prophet ﷺ maybe told him, okay, you stay behind and just follow behind as much as possible. So Safwan radhiallahu anh, he comes upon this silhouette of a person in the middle of the desert, and he doesn't know who it is. So as he comes closer and he sees Aisha radhiallahu anha there, so Aisha radhiallahu anha says that I woke when he said the words Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. So Safwan radhiallahu anh says istirja'. He says Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and this is said when there's a musibah, when there's a difficulty or something like that happens. So he said this, and then he turned away and he moved away. And she says that I covered my face right away, and she says that he had recognized me because he saw me before the hijab, before the part that was revealed. So he knew who she was, and that's why he said Inna lillah, like our Mother Aisha radhiallahu anha is left behind, what's going on here. So he basically does that and he moves away. So he takes his camel, he puts it on the ground, sits it down on the ground, and he moves away. Then she says that I sat down on the camel, he came back, took the reins of the camel, and he did not speak to me, he did not say one word to me except for the initial words, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. He said that he didn't even ask, he didn't even ask how did you get left behind or what's the story, anything. He just said these words, istirja, and he continued.